I am often accused, or credited, depending upon one's perspective, of leading an authentic life. As nearly as I can tell, the accusation or accolade refers to the following definition from Merriam-Webster: true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. Fundamentally, aren't we all true to our personality, spirit, and character? How could we act otherwise in the absence of multiple personalities? I have concluded that we've been captured by the culture in which we are immersed. We are unable to escape without killing ourselves, yet the culture is killing us. We're 6 millennia into the culture of Abrahamic religions, indicating we are inextricably immersed within a culture over which individuals have little or no control at the societal level. Far worse, we are at least 70,000 years into the cognitive revolution. This was the point at which we determined humans were fundamentally different from, and therefore better than, other organisms. Once we decided we were the superior life form, we separated ourselves from the rest of the living planet. This decision created the perfect justification for trashing our only home. And so, we did. Sadly, we're barely more than 2 millennia into Western civilization and the 6 questions of Socrates. What is good? What is piety? What is virtue? What is courage? What is moderation? And what is justice? These great questions are seldom considered within contemporary society. Furthermore, every person listening to these words is a product of an industrial civilization that depends upon expansive use of fossil fuels. Such use is driving us to extinction, a process that will be hastened greatly if we reduce our use of fossil fuels, as indicated by the aerosol masking effect. Is this the only way to live? Is this the best way to live? Do our hyper-connected, high-tech lives lead us along paths of excellence in the spirit of Socrates? This culture is steeped in patriarchy and depends upon violence for its continuation. Is it safe to assume this culture is the ultimate expression of our humanity? Is it safe to assume that this culture is the best we can do, simply because this culture is the only one we have ever known? Is it safe to assume there is no other way beyond the hierarchical omnicide we've come to depend upon for money, water, food, and personal identity? Questioning the culture and its underlying assumptions follows the model promoted and popularized by Socrates. Answering these questions requires one to step back outside the normalcy bias and profound enculturation of the way we live. Asking challenging questions, much less answering them, requires enormous courage when the questions themselves refuse to validate, much less approve, this irredeemably corrupt system. I do not claim to know the answers to these questions. Certainly not for you. I'm not certain they have answers independent of the person pondering them and his or her personal experiences. I nonetheless believe it is important to ask the questions and develop personal responses to them. As a result, I will tackle these and related questions in this video and in 2 follow-up videos. Bear in mind that for the most part, culture discourages us from asking, much less answering, most of these questions. So many questions, so little time. Throughout our lives, we spend considerable time seeking feedback from people and institutions, but the feedback we seek generally falls within a small subset of important issues. Furthermore, I question the wisdom of seeking validation, much less approval, within the realm of an irredeemably corrupt system. Some of us seek to conduct meaningful lives. However, the universe imposes upon us a meaningless existence. There is no meaning beyond the meanings we create. In attempting to create meaning, which often involves attempts to outrun our mortality, we generate distractions. We occasionally call them objectives, goals, or acts of service to others, and the result is our legacy. Yet it's too late to leave a better world for future generations of humans. The concept of leaving a legacy becomes moot when staring into the abyss of near-term human extinction. What, then, is the point? Are we, in the words of English poet Francis Cornford, quote, magnificently unprepared for the long littleness of life, end quote? As we seek feedback about the conduct of our lives, we simultaneously seek distractions. The distractions include the movies we watch, the books we read, the trips we take, the discussions in which we engage. The line blurs between distractions and authentic work until we are defined by the combination. The totality becomes who we are. The nature of our distractions is what makes us human, in the sense of differentiating us from other primates. Non-human primates don't read books, much less discuss them. Such distractions do not enable our survival, and in that sense are not necessities, such as, for example, food, water, and shelter. However, they are not necessarily luxuries either. Apparently, there are shades of existential gray. These shades of existential gray are evident in our pursuit of meaningful lives. How do we differentiate between necessity and luxury? How do we distinguish what we want from what we need? And are these distinctions important? When I began the ongoing process of walking away from the omnicide of industrial civilization, I felt I had no choice. My inner voice overrode my outer culture. I have subsequently come to realize that most people born into this set of living arrangements are literally and figuratively incapable of making a similar choice. Distinguishing between needs and wants, between necessity and luxury, is hardly clear. Occasionally we turn to wise elders in our attempts to infuse our lives with meaning. Kurt Vonnegut often quoted his uncle in response to the question about meaning, that we're here to fart around and don't let anyone tell you any different. Vonnegut's son, Mark, between the Looney Bin and Harvard Medical School, responded to the question, "Why are we here?" with the following comment, quote, "We are here to help each other through this, whatever this is." End quote. As I have pointed out previously in this space, we can follow both paths. We can help each other through this, and we can fart around. As much as I love Mark Vonnegut's response, it fails to acknowledge that service to others is important, and it's a trap. Service to others is no longer virtuous when the entrapment includes self-inflicted harm, including emotional or psychological suffering. Buyer beware. As the Buddha pointed out more than 2 millennia ago, life is suffering. Do we have an obligation to minimize suffering? Does that obligation extend to our individual selves as well as to other humans? Does it extend to non-human species too? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer famously defined happiness as the alleviation of suffering, implying a temporary condition. The pursuit of happiness, from Schopenhauer's perspective, the alleviation of suffering, is a right guaranteed by the founding document of the United States, but I have no idea why it's guaranteed or if it stops at the alleviation of suffering. If the alleviation of suffering qualifies as happiness, then it seems wearing shoes that are 2 sizes too small is a great strategy for producing happiness, if only at the end of the day, when the shoes are removed from one's feet. If happiness goes beyond the alleviation of suffering, perhaps it includes joy. But the notion of such an idea drags into the discussion the notion of documentation, hence measurement. How do we measure joy? Is it the same as the bliss produced by ignorance? How do we know when we've stumbled upon it? And if joy is meritorious, even at the expense of suffering by another, how do we balance the existential books? Consider, for example, a single example from the Abrahamic religions, aka patriarchy. Marriage. Do we have an obligation to minimize the pain when a monogamous relationship becomes personally painful, or even a matter of indifference? This would seem to be a classic example of the loss of daily joy. Contemporary culture suggests we muddle through, in sickness and health, until death, and then the ultimate personal endpoint solves the problem of suffering.